must really thank Cindy and Chatming for inviting me to speak at the Wisdom 2.0 Asia Conference and to listen to so many wonderful speakers that we have starting from yesterday and today. And I realize that I'm speaking to an audience of coming from different religious traditions, but today I'll be speaking really from the Buddhist perspective, mindfulness from the Buddhist perspective, and I hope that that is all right with you. Well, one of the amazing things that we see is how mindfulness has actually picked up so strongly in the West, and especially, Google, you have Search Inside Yourself program to create enlightened leaders worldwide. Also, Drucker's School of Management at Claremont Graduate University. Mindfulness course in order for people to be effective leaders. Steve Jobs himself has said that his early studies of Zen Buddhism has influenced his creative output and business practices as Apple, and also the Aspen Institute president Walter Isaacson said that most of us could benefit by having a little bit more Buddha in our daily lives. Now, over the past decades, and I think we have already heard this morning, Dan has very nicely summarized the range of research that is done on mindfulness. And we know that is not all, because in the universities, more researches will be are being undertaken and will be published. For instance, in the University of Utah, they found that individuals become more mindful, having more stable emotions, better control over their moods and all that. This is one of the benefits of mindfulness. And there was a conference called the Society for Personality and Social Psychology Annual Conference this year. And the speakers were basically saying that mindfulness can make you a kinder person, more ready to forgive, calm your neurosis, unravel unconscious racial biases, and also restore a sense of wonder. Now, we do know that mindfulness is really wonderful as a way of restoring inner balance, that when we are mindful, we are fully aware of what is happening moment to moment without judgment, and not distorted by biases, of old memories, of anticipation of the future, or thinking about the past. And we know that studies have shown that mindfulness enhances creativity and innovation, reduces stress, helps to increase gratitude, appreciation, and happiness, and also more connected to our lives. So there's a lot of benefits that have come about. There is also a lot of researches done by neuroscientists. There is one from Harvard University, Sarah Laser, who mentioned that mindfulness meditation not only reduces stress, but changes the brain structure. I think what she's actually saying is that the gray matter that we have, especially that associated with insular and sensory regions, the auditory and sensory cortex, as well as the front cortex, associated with the working memory and executive decision making, increases in volume. And also, it is possible for people who are 50 years old to have the gray matter of a 25-year-old. So that is how brains could actually be regenerated. It's very interesting. And of course, we have Chatming's book itself, Search within Inside Yourself. Make sure that you get an autographed copy from him. And of course, he brings together some of the research in neuroscience, and how it helps leaders to become more focused, and to become more aware, to be more emotionally tuned, in tune with others. And in his book, he argues that it is really the foundation of emotional intelligence. Now, of course, mental culture, from the Buddhist perspective, is really part of self-cultivation. The Dalai Lama says that the ultimate purpose of the Buddha's teaching is to serve and benefit humanity. And I think Ken Blanchard, the writer, author of 1 Minute Manager, says that, does the Buddha have anything to offer to non-Buddhists in the workplace? My answer is wholeheartedly and enthusiastic, yes. In fact, the Buddha's teaching provides practical and useful answers to situations we face every day. His teachings are not about theories, but being here and now and being and doing. Now, of course, these are wonderful things, that benefits that we have about meditation, but really these benefits are not the goal of for Buddhists that you like to derive from meditation. The purpose of why the Buddhists involved in meditation is because meditation is a crucial component in the path of liberation leading to enlightenment. So we're actually thinking about enlightenment, much as we feel very impressed with the researchers that are coming up with a whole range of benefits. And the purpose of mindfulness is stated in the Satipatthana Sutta. This is called a discourse on the foundation of mindfulness. I'll speak a little bit more about the sutra later on. A sutra means a discourse. And this method of doing mindfulness is for overcoming sorrow and misery, for the destruction of pain and grief. So really, the goal of meditation is nothing short of gaining enlightenment. And here you have the Noble Eightfold Path as a path for liberation. This is the very first teaching of the Buddha. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the very first discourse that the Buddha gave covers this path of liberation. And it has got three components for those who are not very familiar with this. The first component is what we call the wisdom component. Here you have right understanding, or in the Pali it's called samma ditti. Samma means wholesome, complete, almost perfect, very often translated as right. And ditti, understanding, it also means vision, the right view. And right thought, this is the wisdom component. And you could see under morality, you have right speech, right action, right livelihood. And the morality component is really quite important for mental transformation. So we are not just talking about mindfulness as it stands alone, not in a silo, but you will need the you would need the purification of morality to help support mental cultivation. And you could see that right mindfulness is only one component of what we call samadhi, or mental cultivation. You also have right effort and right concentration. Sometimes concentration itself gives a wrong meaning because people think you put in a lot of effort to focus the mind and then they get headache when doing meditation. It is more of unification of mental energies. Now, what is the purpose of meditation? The purpose of meditation is to know the mind, to shape the mind, and to transform and to free the mind. Basically, to know the mind, this is in order for us to get a deeper understanding of ourselves at the experiential level. Now, the mind itself is very mysterious, almost elusive, although it's so close to us. We know so little about the mind. And the practice of mindfulness will make us witness the mental processes and understand the mystery of the mind. Most of the time, we are reactive. We never almost had an opportunity to see what goes on in the mind until we sit down quietly and just watch the mental processes of the mind. We could see that within our minds we have habits, we have compulsive tendencies, we have reactive natures, and there are also positive and negative mental energies. And we also understand why we are like what we are. Certain actions, certain thoughts keep on cropping back again and again. And those are the kind of habitual tendencies that we have generated. And many things becomes clear to us. What is mind? What is matter? What is cause and effect? And how do we react to sensory impressions? And of course, we are also aware of the universal fact of changes, and also the feeling of unsatisfactoriness. Next is to shape the mind. The mind is so unwieldy, and yet may turn so pliant. It is really, when we first to start to meditate, the mind is so unwieldy and obstinate, never really wanting to settle down on the mental meditation object. I think the Buddha has used the word of almost like a monkey, a monkey mind, like jumping from tree to tree, never able to sit down for a moment. But if you persist on by bringing the mind back again to the meditation object again and again, the mind begins to settle down. And eventually, the mind becomes so pliant, so agile, so focused, and so alert. And this is something that is possible if we sit down and really involve ourselves in some mental cultivation. And sometimes a single moment of mindfulness or wise reflection is really invaluable for us in order to prevent us doing actions that are heedless, that are thoughtless and rash, that we later regret. And of course, to free the mind. Meditation is basically to free the mind. Mindfulness forges the principle of liberation. And that is through the penetration of truth called insight or vipassana. And it is to develop wisdom and understanding in life, how we can be more creative rather than reactive, and gain mastery of our life by also understanding what we call the three characteristics of impermanent, of suffering, and of non-ego. And this is not intellectual understanding. In fact, if you go to a retreat, all your book knowledge must be put aside. And you just look at the mind almost like a child looking at it for the first time, for us to learn from the mind. Yeah? Well, basically, in the Buddhist system of meditation, we talk about two approaches to meditation. One is what we call development of tranquility. This is called samatha bhavana. Samatha is tranquility, bhavana is mental cultivation, and the other approach is what is known as the development of insight, of vipassana bhavana. Now, as far as the samatha bhavana is concerned, that's the development of tranquility. Tranquility meditation leads to a high degree of mental unification and stillness. And if you carry on practicing this method, it can also lead to meditative absorptions, which we call jhana. And the other approach is the vipassana bhavana, the development of insight. And in this system of meditation, the focus is really to lead to understanding on insight rather than tranquility and calmness. It is, what do we want to understand? We want to understand the nature of phenomena. And how do you understand the nature of phenomena? By looking at your own mind and your own body, your thoughts, your mental objects. And from that, you have a very deep understanding. You have an insight into yourself and into the world, into the universe, actually. Vipassana comes from two words, vi and passana. Vi means various. It refers to the three characteristics of transiency, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And passana means right understanding of the mental and physical processes. So vipassana means understanding of the three characteristics. In terms of tranquility meditation, you can use many objects for this meditation. For instance, you can use prayers, mantras, sound, colors, depending on the tradition, the teachers and students. And some useful techniques for tranquility meditation would be like mantra recital. I think in the 60s you have the guru who teaches the transcendental meditation to Beatles. It started with mantra recitals, but this has got a long tradition, not only just from the Indian tradition, but also cutting across other religious traditions as well, using mantra. There was one teacher that says, I'm going to give you a very powerful mantra, please recite after me. Ba, everybody say ba. I say na, everybody say na. And na. And he says, again, ba, everybody ba, na. And somebody says, that sounds like bananas as a mantra. But you can also do other things as well under samatha meditation, and this is the cultivation of loving kindness, or called metta. I myself have been leading metta meditation at my center for the last 18 years. And this is really wonderful in order to develop connections with other people, developing the qualities of the heart. Yesterday we had Roshi Joan mentioning about, the soft heart. And this is the practice of metta meditation. And also awareness of breathing, which is called anapanasati, which is both method and object for tranquility meditation as well as for vipassana insight meditation. Now, Buddhism offers actually a wide variety of meditation training and methods. And in fact, in the Buddhist tradition, there are 40 different objects, not only systems of meditation, but just different objects. 40 different objects have been mentioned. And some of the systems of tranquility meditation actually predates the Buddha. The Buddha himself learned some of this system. But eventually, after he has reached a very high level of mental absorption, he still could not find a way of release. So he decided to go on his own, and by turning to vipassana meditation. And the Buddha has actually taught the discourse on the establishment of mindfulness called Satipatthana Sutta. And this is really a very comprehensive discourse on how do we go about doing vipassana meditation. And also in terms of Buddhist practice, you can do tranquility and then move on to insight meditation, or you can start with insight and go to tranquility, or you can just go pure tranquility or pure insight. So different ways of approaching it. Now let us look at Satipatthana Sutta. And this sati means skillful attention or awareness or mindfulness. Patthana means keeping present, being aware or establishing. So hence, Satipatthana Sutta means establishment of mindfulness. And this discourse is really taught at the heart of Buddhist meditation because it provides the most simple and direct and most thorough and effective method for the training of the mind. And the Buddha actually called this the way of mindfulness, Satipatthana Magga, or the only way, Ekayano Magga. And this Satipatthana Sutta is really highly regarded. I think for many, many years in the Buddhist countries, they use this to chant in order to gain merits and all that. But the revival of putting this into real serious practice was started by U Narada Mahathera. He's also known as Mingun Sayadaw from Myanmar, who passed away in 1955 at the age of 87. So he actually had a look, he really analyzed the Patitana Sutta and tried to use various elements and put that into actual practice. And so this becomes part of the retreat. And he has many students. His students popularized his meditation throughout Burma and various parts of the world. And one such master was U Subhana Mahathera, also known as Mahasi Sayadaw. His approach goes directly to the practice of mindfulness, and he says that it's not so necessary to go into absorptions. But there was a big debate about whether you go jhana or not. But this is one approach of using the Satipatthana Sutta and going it in what we call pure vipassana method. Of course, these are some things about mindfulness. Let me just go. Okay. In the Satipatthana Sutta, it covers 4 types of contemplations related to the cultivation of insight. One is contemplation of the body. This is called Kaya Nupassana. Then you have contemplation of feelings, Vedana Nupassana. Contemplation of mental states, Chitta Nupassana. And contemplation of mental contents and objects, called Dhamma Nupassana. And there's a whole listing of each of these what it means by contemplation of the body, different ways of looking at the body, different ways of looking at the feelings, contemplation of mental states as well as mental objects. But this is really the basis of another talk. It's not possible for me to cover that within this talk. So let us just, if you like, you could actually do a little bit more research into the Satipatthana Sutta. The right mindfulness comprises the whole person and the whole field experience, and they extend from the body to the feelings, to the mental processes, including mental content and the perception and thought. Oh, no, I'm moving backwards. Yeah. Okay, and of course it depends on direct experience. You just have to put aside all the book knowledge, all the things that you have collected over time, and just use bare attention. Just watch without being involved, putting aside judgment, discussions, speculation, thinking, theorizing. And in the practice of mindfulness, the mind is kept at the level of just mere recognition. And it sounds so simple, but the mind goes back to the habit again of thinking, and you have to keep on bringing the mind back again and again and again to just pure recognizing, just pure watching. After a while, the mind becomes fairly good at this. And in the practice of right mindfulness, the Buddha said that this disciple acts with clear comprehension on going and coming, acts with clear comprehension in eating, drinking, chewing, and tasting, acts with clear comprehension in walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, awakening, acts with clear comprehension in speaking and keeping silent. And this whole process is being used in a retreat. And that's what we have to do. And very often thoughts gets in the way. We form concepts, views. This is a thinking mind. And you almost have to step aside and say, thinking, in order to dislodge yourself from that and get back to just mere watching. Buddha called the mental construction called papancha. Okay, so we sit when we're sitting. We just breathe when we're breathing. We walk when we're walking. What could be more simple? A Chinese monk once asked his master, "What is enlightenment? What is it like for you?" The master replied, "When I eat, I eat. When I sleep, I sleep." And that's what enlightenment is. Sounds so simple. Now, of course, there are 3 levels of seeing. And, first is recognition. Second is looking deeply. And third is realization. Recognition is coming to terms with the situation as it is without resorting to self-denial, escapism, or clouding up the issue. Looking deeply means putting the effort to see the situation properly in order to understand the cause, nature and causes, and also realization, in order to gain an insight into the situation after studying and reflecting and practicing. Now, let me just put this together, these three levels of watching, coupled with the Four Noble Truths. And in this framework, I'm basically referring to the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh's approach. Yeah? The three levels. First noble truth is the truth of dukkha, or suffering, and the recognition is that this is dukkha, this is suffering. Then, looking deeply, suffering should be understood. Realization is suffering is understood by looking at suffering. Then, on the second noble truth, the cause of suffering, the recognition is that this is the cause that has led to suffering. Looking deeply is this cause should be understood, and realization is this cause is understood. Third noble truth, cessation of suffering, which is also well-being. Recognition is well-being is possible. Looking deeply, well-being should be obtained, and realization, well-being is obtained. And under the fourth noble truth, the path leading to the end of suffering, how well-being arises. A recognition is there is a path that leads to well-being. Looking deeply, this noble path has to be lived, and realization, this path is being lived. Now, let me just go through very quickly one by one. First is recognizing the first noble truth. And this practice, this is how we apply mindfulness to just watch our mind or our body. We recognize that we must stop running from our pain. And this is almost reactive. Something uncomfortable, a discomfort arises. We just want to change. We just want to move away from discomfort to comfort. Almost a conditioned reaction. But hey, wait a minute. Before you do that, just stop and just watch. You need to recognize. Don't run from our pain. We need courage and tenderness to recognize, to acknowledge, and identify our suffering. And to determine whether its basis is it physical, is it physiological, is it psychological? And we treat our suffering almost with kindness and non-violence. Very often when we go on a retreat, when pain arises, we fight with the pain. We tense our body, and there's a lot of anger. Or maybe we look around and we say, hey, how come the others are doing better than me? They seem to be sitting better than me. So there is this feeling of like when you start comparing yourself with others. But you must treat yourself with this kind of kindness and non-violence, and look at yourself and embrace your fears, your hatred, your anguish and anger, so that you begin to recognize discomfort as discomfort, suffering as suffering. Second is, the second way of looking into the first noble truth is looking deeper. Go a little deeper into the first noble truth. After recognizing and identifying our pain, we take time to look deeper into it, to understand its nature, its causes, how it arises, how it falls, how it fluctuates, how one thing leads to another. You have something that strikes your senses, and immediately some reaction arises from your mind. Either, yeah? And also the suffering that you experience, whether it is depression, illness, difficult relationships, or fear. This needs to be understood. You're almost like a doctor, looking at the situation almost objectively, looking at it with this kind of kindness, trying to understand it for what it is. And after you do that, then you realize the first noble truth, understanding the nature of phenomenon. And it can be expressed as, this suffering has been understood. And after studying, reflecting on it, and practicing the first noble truth, we can now call our suffering by its specific name and identify its characteristic. And this alone brings us happiness and joy, because you have now gained an insight into the first noble truth. Now, moving on to the second noble truth, the first level of seeing is recognizing the noble truth. After we have successfully diagnosed our ailment, for a time we continue to create suffering for ourselves. And we recognize that I continue to create the suffering. But when we look deeper, we see that there are actually some nutriments that help us, that feed into our suffering. Now let us, what are the nutriments that we have? One is edible food. Do we ingest food? Do we smoke and do things that is really harmful for the body? So this is one level of the nutriment that God makes us to suffer. Second, it will be the sense impressions. The sense impressions are our six sense organs plus the mind, sending us all these impressions. When there's something pleasant, immediately within the mind rises that attachment. You want some more, you want it to last. And if it is unpleasant, immediately there is this feeling of wanting to push aside. But if you were to watch your mind very carefully, you notice that there is a space First, you have the sense impression. There's no reaction yet. And then there is this mental reaction. That comes with your perception and your reaction. And after that, the mind begins to take over. So you need almost to catch it just when it arises and just watch how it arises before it leads to some other things. And of course, you have volition and intention. This is the will to obtain what we want. We have the feeling of ego, things like that coming into the picture. And also consciousness, which is composed of all the seeds sown in the past. And this is something that we nourish it with love and compassion rather than with hatred and greed. Now, we can also look deeper into the second noble truth. And if we do that, then we see that real happiness is possible. If we stop ingesting, if we stop taking in these nutriments that cause us to suffer, we see the nature of suffering and the way out. And mindfulness is the energy that can help us to stop. And, it could be like walking mindfully, breathing mindfully. You can actually see the Four Noble Truths in action. And when the cause of suffering is seen, then healing becomes possible. Now, realizing that the second noble truth, we not only vow, but we should also stop ingesting the nutriments that create suffering. And this is when you are hungry, you eat. When you're tired, you sleep. And you have to be yourself after you gain genuine insight. Now, moving on to the third noble truth, the third noble truth is that you recognize the possibility of the absence of suffering and the presence of peace, which is called nibbana. And if you don't have peace and joy at this moment, at least you can recall some peace and happiness that you have. Also, when in the silence of your meditation, you'll also experience peace that lies within. The peace that is generated within your own hearts and minds. And then it makes you know that actually this peace, a release from suffering is really possible. That is the recognition level. Second is looking deeper, looking deeply into the third noble truth. And this is you encourage yourself to find peace and joy. And touch the things that bring you peace and joy. Touch the seeds of peace and joy. Not the seeds that create anger and dissatisfaction within our hearts. We don't run away from the things that are unpleasant and only to embrace things that are pleasant. We need to face difficulties and grow new happiness. It's almost like a gardener that makes use of manure, and from the manure you have wonderful vegetables and flowers. So embrace your suffering, smile to it, and discover the source of happiness, and which is right within. We learn the art of cultivating joy, and you also realize that your suffering is not worth suffering for. And then you realize the third noble truth. When you face your suffering directly, your joy will become deeper, and you know that suffering and joy are both impermanent. Sometimes suffering arises, sometimes joy arises, but they don't last. Like being like an organic gardener, transforming garbage into flowers. And this practice will make you realize that suffering and happiness are not two. Really, they're not two. And when you reach this stage, your joy is no longer fragile. Now, moving on to the fourth noble truth, we recognize that noble truth, the eightfold path that can lead us out of suffering. Maybe we do not know how to practice it yet. Now, this is spelled out very, very well in the Buddhist teachings. So you recognize the Four Noble Truths, and then you look deeply into the Four Noble Truths, and you encourage yourself to practice this path. And this is to be realized by learning, reflecting, and practicing. And this is the path that deals with our real difficulties in life. The transformation is gradual, but we can see the causes of our suffering. We make the effort to change our behavior and bring our suffering to an end. And finally, you realize the Four Noble Truths, the fourth noble truth, by seeing our suffering clearly through the practice of mindfulness, by understanding its roots. We are able to understand things as they are. The Pali word is yatha bhuta jnana, to understand things as they really are. Not with our own perceptions, not with our own delusions, and in our own lives and in our practice. And we also understand the interconnected nature of the Four Noble Truths. And when we look deeply into any one of the Noble Truths, you see that it is connected with the other three Noble Truths. And the Buddha says that the moment you know how your suffering came to be, you're already on your path of release from it. With that, thank you.